Sean Durkin is the writer and director behind the new film The Nest, starring Carrie Coon and Jude Law. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Sean, and I'm curious right off the bat what the impetus was for telling this story of a marriage in particular.
Yeah, so I spent my childhood in England, but I moved to New York when I was 11 and lived there for 20 years. And in 2012, I went back to England to do a miniseries called Southcliffe. And while I was there, I was really struck by how similar London and New York felt at the time versus when I was a child. When I moved, there was such a stark difference. And so I think I just started to reflect on that time and that period of my life, and thought that I wanted to explore what a sudden move for a family would do, and really set it in that time. And then as I wrote the script, I went through some pretty major life changes over the next 4 or 5 years, and so it really accompanied me through that. And what started as a reflection on childhood really became more of a reflection on adulthood, marriage, career, ambition, all sorts of things that it became. And out of that rose this desire to really make something about a complex married couple. um, I often feel that we don't see enough married couples that are into each other. And I'm sort of tired of that, and so I wanted to portray this couple that is, very much in love, very great partners in a lot of ways, and then total opposites as well, and explore that dynamic of sort of this fierce love and fury they can have towards each other.
Yeah, you mentioned there haven't been a lot of films, I guess, and stories about, domestic dramas about people and squabbling and things like that. There hasn't been a lot that have focused on them being in love, but I'm just curious if there are any films or stories that you kind of drew upon about marriage or any of the other themes in the film that influenced you when you were writing the script.
Yeah, seeing Shoot the Moon was a big moment for me. I'd never even heard of the film, and I had a meeting with someone and I told them what I was working on. And it was like the first couple of weeks of writing the script. I'd been living with it in my head, but I was actually like started the script and had this meeting, and someone said, "Oh, you're doing that. You have to see Shoot the Moon." And I'd never heard of it, and so I saw that, and that was yeah, it was a big moment to see this couple. And while that's about a divorce, there's still so much love in that house. Those girls are so amazing. And Diane Keaton's story is, he leaves her, Albert Finney leaves her, but it's a real liberation story for her. And there's still love there. And they're also, his Albert Finney's masculinity in that film, where he's sort of angry about things he doesn't understand in himself. And there's a real complexity to that film, and those dynamics. And I found it both, moving and devastating, yet quite warm and atmospheric too. The setting of that film is atmospheric, having any sort of genre. And I took that a step further, obviously, but that was a big moment for me.
Yeah, and I think this is a story that could have taken place in the present day, if you changed a few things around. So I'm curious why specifically the 80s during this kind of Reagan and Thatcher era for this story.
Yeah, I ultimately think the best way to reflect on now is to look at the past. And I wanted to create something which sort of ask the questions of where we are now by examining something that was, 30 some years ago. And it started from a personal place, just my own childhood and moving a lot as a child, and so I wanted to explore that. But it grew very much grew out of that, and I did a lot of research and really landed on 1986 as being this moment in time where there was both extreme optimism in certain, financial sectors, but there was also this recession approaching that was clear. Also, maybe was being ignored by certain people, and there was a sort of bullishness about moving ahead, and there was a celebrated ambition that I wanted to be deeply connected to the core of the struggle within the family. And 1986 was pre-financial crash. It was the height of deregulation. It was this moment where the American dream was literally being exported, and American businesses were trading in England for the first time. So it was just the perfect moment, and very much, what we can trace back a lot of what's where we are today to that moment in time. So it felt like the right thing. And the other part of that is that I wanted to create something that was almost unnoticeably period. I feel like if you really look at the references of the time, besides the obvious indicators, a lot of fashion and style isn't that different. And so it was about creating that feeling of where it just didn't feel that distant, even though, it's been a while.
Right. Well, there's also a particular tone to the movie where there is this kind of impending sense of dread, and it feels like it could almost be like a haunted house story, but it never really becomes like an overt horror movie or even a traditional type of thriller. So I'm curious why you wanted to strike that very specific tone that you were able to accomplish.
Yeah, I love, I love genre, and I think, I think uh, dread and fear and things like that is something that only is the art form. Cinema is the only art form that can create that, and those things and those anxieties are such a big part of the human experience. And so I really like to bring those elements of that cinematic language and that version of storytelling into drama. And so whereas with Martha, I brought a thriller element that I thought was truthful to the psychological state of the main character, I did the same here with more of a haunted house atmosphere to represent the psychological state of this family drifting apart because of this move, and the isolation and the loss of trust, and the revealing of secrets and a sort of past. Those are all things that a haunted house gives you, and were the things that were at the core of this story. And so, and also just the fact is, when you go into those houses or live in houses like that, they are scary. They're just scary to be in. They are alive. This house is 700 years old. So whether or not it's haunted, it does make noises, and it does move, and it is a place with an energy.
Yeah, I was curious about just because part of the dread element of the film comes from just this country house, and I imagine it was extremely important to find the right house for that. How did you go about finding that very gothic country house?
Yeah, it was like a casting call. It was we an amazing locations team, and we knew we were going to be based in London, and so we there's plenty of these houses in England, and so we went, and my team saw, I don't know how many, 50, I'm not sure, and then went through pictures, and then we sort of narrowed it down to 10, and then I went with my team, my DP and designer, and we went and saw, and the tricky thing was, we would pull up to a place, and it would be perfect from the outside, and we'd be sure, oh, this is it. And then we'd get inside, and there would be no open space, and it would be a series of individual rooms with no real sense of scale in the house, and it was very strange. And so um, we just kept looking and looking and looking and found finally the house we used was one of the only ones that had open space. Because really what I wanted, excuse me, was to be able to be wide, have wide shots to isolate the characters within the house, but also to have always to be seeing into other rooms. And this house that we shot in, every every room has two doors, and most even have three. So there's always these multiple ways in and out. And I thought if we could just incorporate that a bit, it would help with the feeling that Allison has that she can't quite control the space. She can't, you know, lock the doors and keep the house warm and comfortable and all the opposite things that it wasn't in their house in America, which also was equally a hard a task to find because I wanted to have that contrast of something um, cozy and comfortable, felt of the time, and that was also a tricky house to find, and having the two pair to create that that contrast was really important.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about your experience also working with both of these stars individually, starting with Carrie Coon, who, in my eyes, is kind of more of the central character, playing Allison. She's such a Carrie Coon is such a committed actress. What did she bring to the film to sort of help bring Allison to life?
Yeah, she's incredible. I mean, she's so powerful, and it's a really difficult uh, it's a really difficult role because it is, you know, on the page, although very much one person, she has these two very different sides, and I think we don't often see that. Usually, characters in a film are one thing, and I knew I needed someone who, you know, could be both the sort of glamorous arm piece side and the grounded, uh, you know, the grounded, hardworking person, and she just has this ability to transform, but is all grounded in her sort of Midwestern energy, and so she just brings that and a real ferocity to everything she does, but also a playfulness, a humor. She's very, very funny, and so I knew that that would sort of bring this, yeah, this playfulness that is beneath their dynamic, and also quite fearless. And the same with Jude. Both were very unafraid of being ugly, and you know, I mean it in the sense of going places with their characters that, you know, could be judged, and not caring if they're liked, and so yeah, that was yeah, I mean, that's just one of many, I mean, things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually talked with Carrie a few months ago, and she mentioned that your family had a history with trading horses.
Mhm.
And I'm curious what you were trying to reflect in Allison's love of horses and what that says about her character, just the specificity of her
Yeah.
having a special connection with horses in particular.
Yeah, I mean, she's a horse person. I mean, it's kind of that simple. The character's a horse person, and she is a, you know, there's a lot of misconception about what a horse person is. Like, if you, I guess, if people aren't familiar with the world, it can be, you know, seem to be this very sort of, I don't know, like ritzy and I don't know, this thing that it's not. It's very much, you know, very like hardworking, physical job, and it's very specific. And I just wanted to have that be the core of her characters. Very hardworking, you know, hands-on, physical person, and she's running a business, and she's in a time where she still has these ideas that were fed to her by her parents and society, and um, that she needs to follow her man and support him whatever he does, and there's a real duality and contradiction in that, and I wanted to explore that contradiction, um, and also it's also a part of their different personalities between Allison and Rory. You know, Rory sees horses as this as these, you know, things he, as she says, you could talk about at parties and say we're building a stable, where to her it's just inherently in her core of who she is, whereas he sees it as the sort of status symbol and overlooks the real emotional side of it. And it, and that becomes, that becomes central to their conflict in a way. Even though I never really saw it that way, I never really think in terms of metaphor like that. I always think in terms of just who the characters are and follow it. But that is definitely what it ended up being.
And then with Jude Law, I think that the broader audience has more of a relationship with him as an actor. And, he's been a real leading man type for a while now, for decades at this point. But I feel like now he's in a different point, in a different kind of mode in his career. Was there something about Jude that just felt right for Rory?
Yeah, everything. I mean, obviously he is, got the presence and the charm and the power as an actor that we're all familiar with. But the thing I was struck with in meeting him was his warmth and generosity and heart. I knew that Rory needed to have someone who had a real heart and love, and everything Rory does, he believes is the best thing for his family. It's an ends justifies the means mentality, and his end believes that this is the best way to provide for my family, and so there has to be a real love behind his actions, and Jude just has that endlessly, just so caring and warm, and so that was the real the real specific thing that made him so great as Rory, I think.
Well, in the last minute or two here I just wanted to go back to your previous film, Martha, Marcy May, Marlene, which really helped launch Elizabeth Olsen, and her career has really blossomed from there. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, just all these years later, on the experience of making that film in 2011, and what kind of lessons you maybe learned just about the filmmaking process that you ended up bringing to The Nest and some of the other projects that you've produced.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe it's been 9 years,
Mm-hmm.
It's been 10, over 10 years since, I guess it'll be 10 years at the Sundance this year.
Right.
It's crazy. I mean, every time you step on set, you learn something more, and I mean, that was uh I mean, I learned sort of everything on that movie, and also just the beginning. It's, and I haven't watched it in a long time, but it's something I'm still very proud of. And to watch the amazing actors in the movie just have such incredible careers, and you know, Lizzie and Sarah Paulson and Julia Gardner and Chris Abbott, I mean, just everyone. It was just such a special group. And yeah, I'm just, so fond of that time. It was such a rare and special moment. And yeah, love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And for those of you watching, hit like and subscribe for more great interviews, and head to goldderby.com to make your award show predictions.